So our next presenter will be Nyari Samushonga, and she's the CEO of We Think Code, a South African tech academy that operates in Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town. She's originally from Zimbabwe, but she's now on the stage of Craft. Please welcome with a huge applause, Nyari Samushonga with the speech, Building Systems That Last.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just gonna quickly get this set up. Is it on? Oh, sorry. The most obvious thing. Okay, we are live. Good afternoon. It's really good to be here at Craft. I think the last time I spoke at Craft was actually a remote session, and so happy to see humans again. And I think the last time I was outside of the African continent, I was actually in Sweden, March 2020, and who knew it would be 2 more years before I could leave the continent. But it's really exciting to be out here and to be with you. I know I've got the graveyard shift, and I know that I'm one of the few people who likes this heat. So I will try my best to keep you engaged and awake. So, too fast, too furious. Where's this coming from? So the name of the talk keeps changing as I try to figure out what I'm trying to convey. Building Systems That Last was one version. Too Fast, Too Serious is the latest one. But let me start with, oh, am I not in control here? Here we go. Full disclosure, in the last year or so, I have not actually been involved in any building of software products. Prior to that, yes, very often. But I shifted my focus away from working on building software solutions to building the humans that build the software solutions. So I head up a software development academy called We Think Code, based out of South Africa. And what we do is we recruit young people and we train them to be software developers. And part of this transition was an interesting point in time, because I think a lot of my talks are usually public therapy, where all my friends and family are tired of hearing me whinge about something, so I go on a stage and find new friends and family to whinge to. And so this talk is about that transition. And I was coming out of a bit of a burnout in software consulting, lots of pressure, rush, get a whole bunch of things done. And I was like, let me switch this up. Let me go work for a nonprofit company. Less systems, more people, life will slow down. All this anxiety and stress that I'm under will go away, and what could go wrong, right? So this talk is about, my anxiety answering the question, what could go wrong? And so We Think Code was founded in 2015, and it's a software development academy. So we are specifically interested in recruiting young people that otherwise wouldn't have ended up in tech. They're not using a lot of tech currently, so they don't wake up and think, I want to be a software developer. Or they think I want to be a software developer, but in South Africa, a good education you pay for. So they can't afford to go to university. And so we're a tuition-free training academy. We recruit smart young people, and over 2 years, we take them from no coding background to a place where they can join a team as a junior developer and, contribute. And so when I moved from software consulting, where everyone talks about this triangle, right? There's the scope of work, there's the time to complete the scope of work, and there's the money to pay for the scope in that time. But I don't know, hands up if anyone has experienced this. What tends to happen as time runs out, the scope goes up, and the deadline doesn't move, and the pressure piles, and you're exhausted, but you still can't sleep at night. Familiar? And so my view was, let me take an administrative job as the CEO of an academy, and that will stop. And I realized that, actually, no. In the same way that when I was working with delivering software, it was like, more, quick, yesterday, please. With We Think Code, it's all the funders are like, when can we go from recruiting 500 people to 10,000 people? And why does it take 2 years? Can't they be up and ready to go in 6 months? And why is it costing so much? Can't we do it for less money? So, same triangle, more scope, less time, less money, but somehow magic. So I began to introspect and think what I thought was a crisis in software is actually maybe a universal way we think. What did Shakespeare say? Was it Cassius in Julius Caesar? The fault is not in the stars, it is in ourselves. And so when I realized this moment, it was like, time to stop running away and finding the answer somewhere else, time to kind of sit still for a second and understand why it is that we're always in that rush. Why is it that when we're trying to build something of value, we put ourselves under immense pressure, which is kind of contradictory to what we're trying to do. And so here's the conventional wisdom that I think creates this mayhem in our soul. Tech is changing fast, right? And obviously the question of what is fast, it depends on whether you're speaking to a cheetah or a snail. They might have a different view on the matter. But the early bird catches the worm. So whatever you are doing now, stop that because you're missing out. Go over there and do that and do it quickly because tech is moving, And so you've got to get on that rushing train. And we must use the latest solutions because they're better, they're faster, So I know you were halfway through doing it that way. It was interesting in the previous talk, immediately, well, why did you use Docker? Why don't you use Kubernetes? Well, and he gave a great answer, because it's working. But there's this pressure for us to start something that's working and then immediately drop it because something new and shiny has come up, because we want to catch that worm, because that's how we stay relevant. And then we must continually be adaptive. That's agile, right? But the question is, how quickly is adaptive versus how slow is adaptive, right? And adjust the product to maximize impact, because when we started, we thought we could reach 200 people, but now we can reach 500. So why not 10,000? Not in 2 years, but in 3 weeks. And why not for the price it costs, but for half the price? And so instead of moving faster with this pressure of tech goes fast, 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 keep changing, keep adapting, before you even finish, start again with something else, I think what we end up creating is a tornado that can't be contained. We don't create this beautiful, virtuous feedback loop of getting better and faster. We actually create an inherent anxiety and ineffectiveness. And so there are unintended consequences to this culture of rush, rush, rush. There's a lack of deep interrogation into the problem we're trying to solve. And so let me go back to the example of We Think Code. We're trying to recruit young people that have never coded before. The first natural question is, usually if you want to evaluate somebody's aptitude for something, you test them in that something. If I want to set up an Olympic team, I pick the person who runs the 100 meters fastest. But if you've never coded before, how do I identify potential in you before you've coded? Well, we do what we do in tech when we're using a new tool set. We experiment. We run some spikes. And those things take time. When we take that away, the time to introspect, to think deeply, to hypothesize, to debate ideas, because why? The worm, the early bird, catch it, go, 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 fast, fast, fast. Then we're building before we know what we're trying to achieve. So that's the first problem. But this problem leads to another problem, is that if we don't have a clear North Star, but there's a team of people that's supposed to be building on one product, there's no cohesion on the team, because everyone's perception of what the worm is and when early was and how fast is fast enough creates commotion and confusion. So now we've got a poorly described goal being chased by people who have very different views on where we're trying to go, and there's degradation of the product. So where we started was, let's rush, rush, rush to get there quick, 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 so that we can have the best, most modern, most adaptive product. Instead, where we end up is gobbledygook, bowl of mud. Everyone is confused, overworked, frustrated, and actually producing suboptimal products. And so we've seen this movie before. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Apple Maps debacle, where Steve Jobs got into a nice big fight with Google and decided, well, who needs Google? We are Apple. We have more money than God. We can very quickly make our own map, and it will have turn-by-turn voice instructions integrated with Siri yesterday. More scope, less time. Let's go. What can possibly go wrong? Well, they didn't know where Germany was. Train stations on the map were located where water actually was, and water was where train stations were. That could be a problem if you're trying to travel. And so we've seen this movie time and time and time again, where we rush, jump onto the latest, coolest tech, push it out before we know what we're doing, frustrate everyone, burn out everyone, and the product crashes. But we're humans. That's our game. That's our vibe. We like to do it again and again and again, and the universe comes back and is like, no, no, no. And the more the universe says no, the more we're like, this is a great idea. Let's rush, faster, faster, faster. So in Shona, I'm from Zimbabwe, and we love consonants. So I actually just put that there just to impress you that I can read so many letters next to each other. But there's a phrase we have, mandikurumidza akazvara mandinonoke. Direct translation, the person who was always in a hurry literally gave birth to the person who was never on time. So that propensity to rush to get there quicker is more likely to create an outcome of getting there slower, if at all you get there, right? We know this. And so the verdict is in. Change is actually really difficult. Change takes time. How do we know this? Because when we're not busy rushing, we've seen some examples of us systematically, pragmatically, slowly changing. It was 100 years between the first time we had a telephone on a fixed line and when Motorola brought out their cell phone. It took us 100 years for that amazing innovation. That's how quick tech was going, right? And then after that, it took another 20-odd years to get to a point where we had voice over IP. That was the next great intervention. Whereas now, I suspect if you're like me and your roaming suddenly quit on you while you were in a foreign country, you're literally relying, one, on a mobile phone that has more computing power than, I don't know, and you're predominantly using data to communicate, whether it's by messaging or by voice. The truth is, we do these interesting innovations on top of that platform with your smartphone. But the speed at which we go from the first invention of a telephone to these modifications of communication to a point where COVID hits and almost exclusively you are online is actually not that quick. Not only is it not that quick, let's talk a bit about AI. It's a convergence of multiple domains that are moving, right? And so when you think about what we can do now with AI, a few things needed to change. The one was we couldn't store as much data as we store now. And when we started being able to store as much data, it was expensive to store that data, much less run multiple analysis and computations over the data, right? And then there's the mathematicians with their algorithms. And so a few things converged. There's a mathematical algorithm, there's data storage, there's a reduction in the cost of accessing it, and then there's ability to now analyze data. And now we're doing some really interesting things with AI. So we can't rush to AI and make all the humans redundant and irrelevant because quick, yesterday, less money, more scope. That's not how it happens in reality. So there's this cognitive dissonance we have as humans, where in reality, we're actually moving with innovation at a stable pace, right? Literally today, I was reading about one of the largest banks in South Africa, which has had crisis after crisis with their systems literally crashing. On tax day, on payday, like when most people are getting their salaries, it crashes. You can't access your money, you're in the middle of a mall, you've just had a great meal, and now you're like, ooh, can I do dishes? Because you know. And if you're on a date, it's even more embarrassing because someone's thinking you're like, what? Okay, so we ate the steak and then now you're what? Of course, the biggest bank in Africa is offline. That's what happened. But then you now read, what are they going to do to solve it? More developers using modern technology to get it going. And yet who's ever worked with enterprise systems that are still running on a COBOL mainframe somewhere, and that thing works? Someone did something modern quickly in a rush, more scope, less time, less money, that broke it. And right now, people just want to be able to take a person on a date and pay for the wine they said they were going to pay for without being anxious seconds before the bill comes. We don't really need to rush. We don't really need to pile on more devs, because guess what we found out 47 years ago? According to Fred Brooks, if you add more people to a project that's late, it will be later. And I remember reading this book maybe 10 years ago and feeling like, oh, wow, how is it that some 37 years ago this was written down, and here I am in these projects that are doing exactly what we knew wouldn't work. 10 years later, we're still busy with the same jam, because eventually, it's just that we haven't done the rush thing enough times. Eventually, something's going to give, and rushing is going to get us there faster, but it isn't. Let's talk about extreme programming, right? This October marks 23 years. We found ways to slow it down, break it down into smaller pieces, test it so that we're building more reliably. I lead a software development academy. People who've never coded before, within like a year, they didn't have any time to write tests because they were running behind on the deadline. So they rushed ahead. And it's not done. Well, it's not done, it's done. And it worked on my machine because I cut a corner, because rush. And I mean, they don't even have clients yet. They don't even have a CIO who's gone on TV and promised the world things that don't exist yet. All by themselves, within a year of learning to code, they've learned to rush, to get there too quickly, to pull in the genius person from across the room who knows everything and is going to solve it in a second. I don't know, it seems like it's in our DNA, this tendency. And so we've got a lot of history that shows us when we build things slowly, stably, and understand what they are, they tend to work. We've got a lot of history that tells us when we don't do that, when we rush, we slow down or actually never arrive. And we've got a lot of literature writing it down and chronicling it for posterity. And yet we still do it. So it's not actually the rapid change of technology or something outside ourselves that creates the crisis, right? It's our own propensity to panic. We have behaviors that we choose to continue to exhibit, that continue to land us in the same places we've been before and we shouldn't be trying to go to. Behavior one, which I've talked about at length, technology changes rapidly. We act fast because we fear annihilation. We can't be the only team that is not running a Kubernetes cluster. We cannot be the only team that doesn't do. I mean, I've sat with clients where they're like, oh, you need to help us take this mobile app into the future. This was a telco client. I'm like, oh, great. So we get our team on it. We're like, okay, they're not going to be a telco anymore. They're going to be a techco, and they're going to do the future quickly, yesterday. Great. We get our team on it. We look at it. The app is crashing. The moment you just try to switch it on, it goes down. So we go back with some really sober, really basic. We think we should make the app stable, and we think we should. But where's the sexy stuff? Where's the AI? Where's the blockchain? And it's like, you don't need that. You need an app that's online that allows people to buy data for their phone. That's what you need. But for some reason, we're convinced that everyone is rushing ahead of us. And if we're the sober ones sitting and thinking it through, sitting and selecting the things we want to use, then we're going to get left behind. And it's weird because we're all doing it at the same time. There isn't actually anyone rushing ahead of us, but that's another story for another day. Our old skills are becoming redundant. And this is a personal one, right? Because I think this is what then drives it. So we must rush to bring in a new tool that we don't understand, that we've never used before, because then people are going to think, Nyari is losing her edge. She's using yesterday tech, dinosaur stuff. You only find that in the museum and a lot of the banking applications, backends, and a lot of the telco backends, and a lot of the government systems that we all rely on. But the point is, I'm not averse to the modern and the progress. The point is when we take away the stability of thought-out decisions that are executed gradually, we deny ourselves the opportunity to be effective. So my recommendation, mostly to myself, is keep calm, drink wine, and understand that your perception of the rate of change is actually the critical factor to the quality of your decision making. It's in your head. So the problem isn't actually what's in front of your eyes that's moving at breakneck speed. It's what's behind your eyes that's creating fallacies of urgency, that's creating an inherent impatience, that desperation to be one of the cool kids. I'm turning 40 soon, and I've officially left behind FOMO, the fear of missing out, and traded it in for some JOMO, the joy of missing out, and the joy of being the one who gets left behind. And officially moving away from this sense that the world is judging you, because your responsibility isn't to satisfy the world and their judgment, but rather it's to create a training pattern that speaks to your why, your what, and your enough. Your why, your what, and your enough. Your why is the purpose. Why exactly are you even in this chair? If you did nothing, what would go wrong? What would collapse? What platform would burn? So why are you even getting out of bed in the morning, switching on that laptop and getting busy with something? Because unless you can understand the core purpose of what you're busy with, you can't stay focused. You're invariably going to be chasing rainbows and unicorns, and I mean literally, with Silicon Valley, we literally call them unicorns. We are literally, with VCs, we are literally chasing unicorns, right? So what is your why? What is the purpose for which you are building what you're building? And whether that's at the level of, a small functionality, an entire system, or in my context, a business, if you inherently don't understand the why, then, you're gonna run into trouble. Oh, sorry. The what? What is the outcome? How will we know that you're manifesting the things that get us to the why? So if the intent was to, build a mobile company that does fascinating and cool things, how will we know that you're progressing towards that outcome? And then ultimately, the enough, which is balance is the only way. It's okay that other people have cooler toys. It's okay that other people are playing with shinier tech. It's okay that other people have academies with 10,000 people and yours is only impacting 700 human lives. It's actually okay. So you need to know your enough, that given that this is my purpose and this is how that purpose will come to life, when I see these things, I am content within myself. So maybe chase the Zen rather than the trauma. And so at We Think Code, to bring it home, this is essentially where we've landed. We want to build a diverse workforce of African developers. When you think new tech, when you think creative tech, you'll very rarely be able to name an African who's designed it. And so our mission is to raise up a generation of a lot of young African technologists. That's our purpose. So if someone is running faster at doing something other than that, I'm not chasing that train. It can bolt any station it needs to bolt. I'm not involved, right? And the what? We want to run an inclusive tech academy because we are not going to get to a place where an entire army of African developers rise up and start to create innovations that are relevant to us and the rest of the world if we're not creating an inclusive platform. And so, if making it cheaper means someone has to pay more money than they have, that's a violation of our core why. If making it faster means when the person graduates, they're not equipped with the knowledge that they need to contribute, it's violating our why. If recruiting using a coding test means someone who's never coded before, but is smart enough and hardworking enough and committed enough to do it, can't get in, it's violating our why. And so the what we do is strongly informed by the how we do, and we measure it. We measure, are we getting enough women into the program? We're now at 50%. It took 3 years. Are we getting enough people from low-income backgrounds into the program? We're getting there. We're now at 60% of people that are living on a family income of $6,000 a year. Are we getting enough people from the rural communities, from the rural communities into the program? Not yet. We're only at 13%, while living in a country that has a 40% rural community. And so the what allows us to measure the why. Are we making steps progressively towards what we need to do? And even if we're going slower, but we can measure the progress, then the outcomes are satisfactory. And are we enough? If conscientious employers are coming and are hiring our graduates, if our graduates are creating interesting tech, if they're saying, thank you, you helped, then that's enough for me. No awards, no unicorns, no quick, no fast, no yesterdays, no regrets, no crashing bank applications. Essentially, why, what, and enough. And if we can start to bring ourselves into a space of discipline around those things, I think we can start to walk away from the mistakes that we make, knowing that they're inevitable anyway. So focus on humanity, because that's what really tech is about. We have fun doing it, we create interesting things, and more we're impacting the world. But if we're going to think that rushing and beating each other and competitiveness is going to get us to a place of impact, then I think we'll cause more harm than we intended. Thank you. That's actually me.
This is a small present from Crafthub to you.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot for your speech.
Thank you. At least now I don't have to pay for the wine with the
No, you don't have to pay for that. Just drink. It's the essence of Hungarian culture. So this is how I call it. So Nyari, you had a really great and interesting speech about that you would like to raise the next generation of coders, developers of Africa.
Yeah.
And I would be really interested that you were talking about how you do not select the people to get into the academy, but can you tell us how do you select exactly them? So there are some logical games or if I'm not really into coding, that's how you...
Yeah, so we use logic games because what they do is they teach us how your brain works with patterns and remembers patterns. And then it's probably one of the longest selection processes. For 6 days, we invite applicants to come onto our campus. We introduce them to new concepts, and then we see how well they grasp those concepts. Okay.
I really loved the Start with the Why from Simon Sinek, how you built up the whole company, the Golden Circle.
Yeah.
You were talking about the why, so this is the main scope, the North Star of the company, but how do you see the vision of the company? We were not talking about that. So in 5 years' time, you would get to the level of, I don't know, a few hundred new developers in Africa, or how do you see that?
I think the sense that I get is we don't have enough programs on the continent that acknowledge that by the time you're 18 or 19, you haven't had sufficient access to coding. And so what we're trying to do is build a platform that we can actually then spread out and have other people independently run it. Because then we're not under the pressure to build a 10,000 person building and cram it with people, but rather we're trying to democratize access to the knowledge and the methodology, because if we can do that, then everyone can autonomously, within their context, take it and run with it. And then at that point, I think we can reach thousands of people, but not with ourselves necessarily, one by one, trying to do the scaling.
That sounds amazing. I would like to involve also the audience. Guys, can you put the Slido behind us? Yeah, so there are a few questions already. Best speech, thanks. Thank you. It's not a question, but thanks for that. Many are chasing the latest and greatest as a way to increase their value on the market. What works might be good for a company, but not for the employees. What do you think about that?
I think the relationship between companies and employees it's a complicated tension. Companies with satisfied employees, do better because the employees show up wanting to be there and they commit and they contribute. So there are times when an individual and an organization are aligned, right? Where you arrive and you're like, I want to try out these things and I want to apply those things, and that's fulfilling. And the organization is like, great, because if you try out those things, then we get to achieve our agenda and our intention. And so that's when it's aligned. Then there come points where it's like in your house, if you've got a dishwasher, it's quicker and easier to put all the dirty dishes into the dishwasher.
Yeah.
But sometimes you've got to scrub a pot. And I think in organizations it's the same thing, where there comes a point where an employee needs to trade off something that they would prefer and take one for the team. I think what creates the complexity is when it's not paid forward. So the organization gets over the bump, the employee makes the sacrifice. Where's the payback? Where's the room for innovation? Where's the space to create? And I think that's where the tension comes from. But I think any leadership that doesn't think happy people will make a better business is probably wrong.
Yeah, we already had a few speeches about that yesterday with Anna Urbaniak and Joseph about why people focus is the most important nowadays and getting along on the market. So yes, you are in line with the message what we want to convey in general. Okay, even without a business reason to chase new tech, how do we deal with temptation that using them at least brings new problems when we are tired of the old?
I honestly think it's about telling the truth. Because, it seems like such a simple and base answer, but new tech is fun to play with. So say that. Just say, I want to play with this new tech because I think it'll be fun. Don't go do a rewrite of an enterprise system that's holding up medical records with this thing that you're playing with because it's fun. And I think, to me, that's really where the conflict arises. It's not that playing with things or doing them for the sake of, I really like exposure to this. I do that a lot. Why don't I just go to Hungary? Because I think it'll be really fun. Now, I could lie that I'm on some major diplomatic mission to, I'm really not. I'm having a good time. And so I think that's where the problem arises, is we don't tell the truth. We don't tell the truth about why we're using something. We don't tell the truth about our limitation of knowledge, because what if they all find out I'm not a genius and a girl wonder? But if we can tell the truth, then we can make the space to play, we can make the space to experiment, and then we can only usher these things into, critical places where important stuff can break when we're ready. And I think that's, for me, the disconnect. It's not that it's wrong to play.
I would have another question which came from the first one I asked you. So when you are getting developers on board, you are only getting software developers, or you are shooting for other roles, for example, POs or Scrum Masters or whatever. So you have different courses from the beginning, or development is the base and then you build upon it?
So we use development as the base, and it's for two reasons. The one was, this was a social experiment. Mm-hmm. Can we take someone who's barely used a computer, much less coded, and in 2 years get them from that place to a place where they can join an organization with developers that have gone to university or working with tech in high school, and actually, they can catch up to that point. And so part of it was literally just pick a single struggle, iterate over the single struggle, and then when you've got a model on it, then you can diversify. So now we're looking at automation QA, for example, working with a company called System Verification out of Sweden, to set up a track that focuses on that. And I think in time there'll be more. But then at least now we've got a methodology and a pedagogy that says, how do we select, how do we train, how do we monitor progress, how do we support? So we feel like, we won't be breaking, humans, because we work with actual humans. It's not just a build, it's a person, by throwing too many things at them before we know what we're doing. So that's, so currently software development, definitely looking to diversify it slowly.
Okay, let's check something from the board. What is the percentage of your coders that works for local companies versus those for foreign companies?
Currently, predominantly local. Only recently, we've actually started working with some European companies. One out of Germany, and I can't remember, is it Sweden? I think it's Sweden for the second one. But predominantly, we've been not just local to Africa, South Africa specifically. And again, same thing, we were working with partners where we wanted them to understand the process we've gone through, so that when they were receiving humans on the other end, they understood. But our humans are blowing out the lights, and so now we're ready to just send them everywhere.
Finding the track, okay. Yeah, it was already asked. Why is important the ratio of women or classes? Why is not enough to find the best candidates?
Oh, that's such a trigger question. Who said poor women are not the best?
You're not the best to answer that. You are the CEO, you're running your own company, no?
Okay, I'm probably going to have a rant now. And I don't know if that's fair, because I have the microphone at the stage, so I'm doing the thing that I'm going to complain about. But it's this scarcity mentality. One pie, one best. Firstly, what is the best developer? Then I'll ask you what stack, what problem, what place. So now I need a solution for prenatal care for someone in a village sitting right now in Kenya, who's the best person to sit at the table to come up with such a solution? Do you think maybe someone who's been poor and pregnant in a village in Kenya?
Maybe not.
So maybe she should be in the room at the table, speaking for herself and coding. Maybe she can work with, I don't know, a white guy from Sweden, and together they can build a solution. The conversation about inclusion is not a scarcity conversation. It's a conversation about solutions. I'll give you an example. There's something we call mobile money. I don't know, is anyone familiar with mobile money? No? Okay. So in Kenya, they invented something called M-Pesa. And how M-Pesa works is, it's like a wallet. It's like a digital wallet where you load money onto it, and then you use USSD to transfer money to someone else's digital identity, right? Why? Because two things. One, huge number of people in rural Africa are what we call unbanked. So they have to trade in cash because they don't have a bank. Two, access. To the extent that ATMs and bank branches exist, they don't have the ability to travel and go there and get the money, right? So what does M-Pesa do? The mobile penetration exceeded the banked population, and so how do we bring financial access onto a mobile phone? Now, would someone who's not in a rural village, or has not had access to that, or context of that, or who doesn't understand the structure of being unbanked in Africa, ever think of such a solution? No, because it's not a problem they have. And so why is inclusion important? Because tech has great mechanisms to solve problems. And it's incredibly important for everybody to have the access and the ability to use these tools to solve the problems in their context. And so whenever people are like, oh, okay, why not just get the best? I think there's this assumption that people who don't have access are not good enough. And it's a problematic assumption, right? If you're in South Africa and your family doesn't have money, and you grow up in a village, and you don't have a great high school education, and you don't have money for university, there's nothing in what I've described that gives me any indication of your intellectual capacity. All of that is structural. Now, if someone doesn't make it their business to go and break down the barriers that are keeping you out and give you an opportunity, then we are all missing out on a big brain person who could contribute, because the best is the one who got to go to school and got to pay for university and got to code. So, yeah, end of rant. There's no scarcity.
Okay. Thanks a lot. It was a great talk. If you have more questions to Nyari, you can find her today after the presentation.